Welcome to the Riddle of the Desert Star, a Sherlock Holmes adventure from the series Sherlock Holmes: The Eastern Enigma, Tales from the Great Hiatus, playing in the year 1892. For years, the world believed my friend Sherlock Holmes perished at the Reichenbach Falls. Yet, hidden in a travel trunk, I recently discovered his secret journals from that great hiatus. Penned in a complex cipher, they reveal his astonishing journey through the East, where his logic was tested by the ancient wisdom of Tibet and the deserts of Sudan. These are the tales from those lost years. The first of these decoded accounts takes us to the perilous sands of Sudan, a strange and dangerous affair he titled, The Riddle of the Desert Star. I shall begin at its outset. Chapter 1. It was during the long, quiet months following the Abernethy affair that Holmes, ever restless, vanished from London. I received but a single, cryptic telegram from Port Said, and then silence. The tale of what followed he recounted to me much later, seated once more before the roaring fire in our Baker Street rooms. His story concerning his time in the Sudan as the explorer Sigerson began in a stifling Khartoum office, where the very air was thick with heat and the fine red dust of the continent. A solitary ceiling fan turned overhead, its lazy creak a monotonous counterpoint to the distant clamour of the city's marketplace. Holmes, or rather Sigerson, sat examining a shard of pottery through a powerful lens, the intense sunlight from the shuttered window illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The quiet was broken by the sound of firm, measured footsteps ascending the wooden stairs, followed by a sharp, authoritative rap upon the door. The man who entered was tall and broad-shouldered, his bearing that of a soldier. He wore the crisp uniform of the Anglo-Egyptian army, but his features were proudly Sudanese, and his eyes held a gravity that bespoke a heavy burden. He closed the door behind him, and the sounds of the city were at once muffled, lending the small room an air of sudden conspiracy. Sigerson. My name is Captain Karim Al-Jamil. I was told I would find a man of singular expertise here, a man who understands the value of discretion. Captain Karim Al-Jamil answered. His voice was a low, urgent baritone, the English precise and formally learned. Holmes set down his pottery shard and gestured to the empty chair opposite his desk. Expertise is a matter of opinion, Captain. Discretion, however, is a matter of practice. You have been travelling for some days, and with haste. There is the dust of the Bayuda steppe on your boots, yet the wear on your uniform's collar suggests you are more accustomed to a staff position than to field command. You are a planner, forced into the role of an agent by circumstance. Pray, be seated. What is this urgent matter? Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson said. The captain's eyes widened almost imperceptibly at this swift analysis, but he recovered himself and sat, placing his hands firmly on his knees. He leaned forward, his expression intent. What you say is true, Herr Sigerson. I am here on a matter of national, and indeed spiritual, importance. I must transport a sacred artifact from a remote tribal region to the security of the coast. It is called the Star of Nubia, answered Captain Karim Al-Jamil. He lowered his voice still further, as if the walls themselves might be listening. It is a diamond of immense size and cultural value, a holy relic to the Bisharin people. And it is in grave danger. A warlord, a brute named Al-Fadl, seeks to seize it. He would not only plunder its monetary value, but its capture would break the spirit of the tribes and consolidate his own power. Captain Karim Al-Jamil replied. A simple matter of theft and politics, then, remarked Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson. It is anything but simple, sir. Al-Fadl is a savage, but he is not a fool. We have reason to believe he is being advised, aided by a European. Someone with knowledge of our methods, our roots. Someone who can turn modern ingenuity to the most villainous ends, replied Captain Karim Al-Jamil. Here, Watson realized, was the crux of it. Holmes, as he later told me, felt that familiar thrill, the electric current that signaled the beginning of a truly unique problem, a contest of wits not just against a desert marauder, but against a calculating mind from his own world. "And you require my services to ensure this Star of Nubia completes its journey. You wish for an escort whose interest is purely scientific. An observer who might see things a military man would overlook." Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson replied. "Precisely. Your reputation as an explorer is impeccable. Your presence would arouse no suspicion. I need your eyes, Herr Sigerson. I need your mind. Will you help us?" said Captain Karim Al-Jamil. Holmes stood and walked to the window, peering through the slats at the sun-bleached street below. The challenge was laid: a sacred diamond, a ruthless warlord, and a shadowy European collaborator. It was a puzzle set upon the grandest of stages. He turned back, a thin, dry smile touching his lips. "Captain, your commission is a most unusual one. The desert offers many challenges. I accept." Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson answered. "We departed Khartoum at the first blush of dawn, leaving the sleeping city behind us. The clamour of the marketplace faded, giving way to a more rhythmic and ancient sound, the soft, heavy tread of our camels upon the sand, and the persistent creak of leather harnesses. The air, still cool from the night, promised a day of unrelenting heat. Captain Karim Al-Jamil rode at the head of our small company, his posture as rigid and proud as the cavalry officer he was. My attention, however, was drawn to Farik ibn Yazid, our navigator, who moved with a silent economy that bordered on the spectral. He consulted no map, his gaze instead forever fixed upon the horizon, or the heavens, as if reading a script invisible to the rest of us. Karim had confided that the entire, winding route was of Farik's own design, a path known only to him. Our third member, the German geologist Herr Otto Vogel, fussed over his instruments with an almost religious devotion. A portly man with a meticulously trimmed beard, he seemed ill-suited to the desert, and his tools even more so. These were not the hearty hammers and chisels of a field geologist, but delicate, intricate things of lens and wire, instruments more suited to a laboratory than the desert. I drew my camel alongside Captain Karim's, my voice low against the whisper of the wind. "An interesting collection of trinkets your geologist carries, Captain," I remarked. "They seem better suited for capturing signals from the ether than for studying rocks from the earth," responded Sherlock Holmes as Sigerson. Karim glanced back at the German, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. "Herr Vogel is a man of science, Herr Sigerson. He assured me his work is of great importance." "We must all trust one another on this journey," responded Captain Karim Al-Jamil. As if sensing our scrutiny, Vogel himself called out, his voice precise and carrying an unmistakable Teutonic accent. "The crystalline structures of the Nubian strata are unique. They require instruments of the utmost precision, you understand." "The utmost," Herr Otto Vogel replied. I offered a non-committal nod and said no more on the matter. By late afternoon the last vestiges of civilization had vanished, and we were adrift in an ocean of ochre sand. As the sun bled its final colors across the western sky, we made camp. The fire crackled to life, its warmth a small, defiant beacon against the profound and sudden chill of the desert night. It was then, as the stars began to glitter with an intensity I had never witnessed in London, that Karim's professional demeanor dissolved, revealing a solemn gravity. His voice dropped to a near whisper, hushed with reverence. "They say the Star of Nubia is not a stone but a djinn's tear, solidified by grief. The spirit is bound to it. It is sworn to protect the diamond from any who would carry it away from its ancestral home," replied Captain Karim Al-Jamil. He stared into the dancing flames, his face a mask of shadow and firelight. Farik sat motionless a short distance away, a silhouette against the star-dusted horizon, while Vogel meticulously cleaned one of his brass lenses. "The djinn does not strike with sword or fire," he continued, his tone growing heavier still. "It is a creature of the desert. It saps a man's strength. It drinks his water. It steals his path and leaves him to the sun. "We are not merely guarding a jewel, Herr Sigerson. We are defying a curse," said Captain Karim Al-Jamil. I studied the earnest belief etched upon the captain's face and held my tongue. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks into the immense, silent darkness. Above us the heavens watched, cold and indifferent. A low moan of wind swept through our camp, and for the first time I felt the true, unnerving emptiness of the great desert surrounding us. An emptiness that seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The chill of the desert night still clung to the air, when a cry, sharp and laced with panic, tore through the quiet of our camp. I was instantly awake, the unsettling tales Captain Karim had spun the previous evening returning to my mind. A low murmur of anxious voices followed the shout, quickly swallowed by the immense silence of the desert. By the time I emerged from my tent, the sun was but a pale rumour on the eastern horizon, struggling to pierce the lingering gloom. Our guides were gathered in a fearful knot, their eyes fixed upon the provisions. Captain Karim stood before them, his face a mask of grim understanding. Seeing me approach, he gestured with a heavy hand. His voice was a strained whisper, carrying a weight of profound dread. "It has begun, my friend. The guardian of the star does not sleep," Captain Karim Al-Jamil answered. He pointed towards a row of goatskin waterskins, laid out the night before, full to bursting. Now, several of them lay limp and utterly deflated, their canvas mouths still securely tied. There was no dark stain upon the sand to suggest a leak, nor any tracks of a desert fox. The water had, to all appearances, simply vanished. While the guides began to pray in low, urgent tones, Sigerson emerged. He moved with a quiet purpose that stood in stark contrast to the rising consternation. He gave a curt nod to Karim before kneeling beside the empty skins, his gaze sweeping over the scene with an intensity that seemed to absorb every grain of sand, every fold of leather. "It is useless to search for a natural cause," Karim stated, his tone heavy with resignation. "This is the djinn's thirst. A warning to us all," Captain Karim Al-Jamil said. Sigerson, however, seemed to pay him no mind. He ran a long, thin finger along the seam of one of the skins, then brought it to his nose. He gently lifted another, weighing its impossible lightness in his hand, before examining the intricate knot that sealed its opening. The silence was broken only by the soft hiss of the wind and the hushed prayers of the men. At last he rose, brushing the fine sand from his trousers. His voice, when he spoke, was calm and precise, cutting through the atmosphere of fear. "A most selective thirst, Captain," replied Sherlock Holmes as Sigerson. "What do you mean?" Karim asked, his brow furrowed. Captain Karim Al-Jamil answered, "Observe the ground beneath. It is as dry as the rest of the desert. A leak, however slow, would have left its mark. Note also the knots. They are undisturbed, yet the skins are empty. And most curious of all, the phenomenon has affected only these skins at the end of the row, the ones furthest from the main guard post," remarked Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson. He paused, letting his words settle. The logic was irrefutable, yet it did little to dispel the unease gripping the camp. Karim stared at the evidence, his belief in the supernatural clashing with the cold facts laid out before him. "No, Captain," Sigerson continued, his voice dropping slightly. "This was not the work of a spirit. A djinn would have no need for such delicate subterfuge. We are dealing with a thirst that is entirely human," responded Sherlock Holmes as Sigerson. As he spoke, my companion's gaze drifted past the worried captain and the praying guides, settling for a moment upon Herr Vogel, the German geologist. Vogel stood apart from the drama, watching not the empty waterskins, but the reactions of the men, a look of detached, almost scientific curiosity upon his face. The memory of the emptied waterskins clung to us like the desert heat itself. Our weary caravan had reached the Bir el-Hammam, the Well of the Dove, a lonely outpost of life in that vast ochre emptiness. The air shimmered above the sand, the only sound the mournful creak of the well rope, as our guides drew up blessedly cool water. Captain Karim, his face etched with relief and lingering dread, watched the proceedings with a hawk's eye. His voice was a low rasp, dry as the dust underfoot. "The djinn has shown mercy this time, Sigerson. This water is clean. We must fill every skin we have left," remarked Captain Karim Al-Jamil. I merely nodded, my attention drawn elsewhere. Herr Otto Vogel, the German geologist, had chosen this moment of respite to unpack a curious assortment of instruments from a heavily padded leather case. He assembled the pieces with a fussy precision, creating a strange device of polished brass, finely ground lenses, and a set of pivoting mirrors that glittered wickedly in the midday sun. He set it upon a tripod, with an air of immense self-satisfaction. He announced, his voice a resonant baritone thick with a German accent. "Ah, the light is perfect. Now we shall see what secrets these ancient rocks hold. This, my friends, is a portable spectrograph of my own design," remarked Herr Otto Vogel. He gestured for us to approach. Captain Karim gave the contraption a wary glance, as if it were some new form of sorcery, but I feigned a polite, academic interest. My gaze, however, was not on the device itself, but on the man operating it. I noted the precise movements of his hands. His eyes, too, were telling. They repeatedly flickered towards the camp's perimeter, where the silent guard, Farik ibn Yazid, gazed towards the hazy horizon. By analyzing the spectrum of reflected sunlight, he lectured, warming to his subject, "I can determine a rock's mineral composition from a great distance. It removes the need for tiresome hammering, a simple adjustment of this primary mirror, so to catch the face of that cliff." As he spoke, he tilted the polished mirror. For a fleeting instant, a brilliant sliver of light, sharp as a needle, shot across the sand. It was not aimed at any rock formation. It lanced directly towards Farik. To any casual observer, it would have seemed a careless slip, a stray reflection. But I saw Farik, who had not moved a muscle for the better part of an hour, subtly shift his weight. It was the smallest of tells, a near imperceptible acknowledgement. The German fiddled with a knob, and another flash followed, this one shorter. A dot, then a dash. The basic elements of Morse. The connection in my mind was forged with the certainty of a chemical reaction. This was no geologist's tool. I kept my tone level, that of a mildly intrigued layman. "A most ingenious application of the heliograph, Herr Vogel," remarked Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson. Vogel started, his hand freezing on the brass casing. His face, which had been a mask of academic pomposity, momentarily slackened with surprise. He recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. He gave a short, nervous laugh. "The heliograph? How you mean for signaling?" "Well, the scientific principle is of course related, yes. But the application here is purely geological, purely for analysis, I assure you," responded Herr Otto Vogel. "Of course," I replied smoothly. "A fascinating trinket indeed," remarked Sherlock Holmes as Sigerson. I turned away, leaving him to his supposed measurements. But I had seen enough. Vogel was no geologist, and the silent Farik was his confederate. The djinn that plagued our journey was not a spirit of the air, but a conspiracy of flesh and blood, armed with modern technology. As the sun began its descent, a new and more tangible sense of foreboding settled over our camp. I knew then that the affair of the waterskins was merely an opening gambit in a far more dangerous game. The midday sun beat down upon our encampment with a ferocity that drained the very colour from the sky. A profound silence had fallen, broken only by the hum of insects and the soft stamp of a camel. I was making notes in my journal when a cry of pure anguish from the central tent tore the stillness asunder, bringing every man in the camp instantly to his feet. Sigerson and I were the first to reach the tent's entrance, pushing aside the heavy flap. Inside, Captain Karim Al-Jamil stood frozen, his hands clenched at his sides, and his face a mask of disbelief. Before him, Spread upon a low table lay the master map of our route, our one guide through that unforgiving wilderness. It is gone. Ruined. The eye of the djinn has found us, remarked Captain Karim Al-Jamil. His voice was a ragged whisper of despair. I stepped forward and saw the cause of his distress. In the very heart of the parchment, a hole had been burnt. A perfectly circular aperture. It had obliterated the most critical portion of our journey. The edges were not blackened and frayed, as one would expect from a stray ember, but were instead a neat, cauterized brown, as if seared by a physician's tool. At that moment, the taciturn guard, Farik ibn Yazid, entered the tent. The sound of his soft leather boots on the rug was barely audible. He glanced at the ruined map, his expression unreadable, then looked to the distraught captain. The sand and the sun can blind a man, Captain, but the stars do not lie, remarked Farik ibn Yazid. He spoke with a profound and steady calm, a balm to the rising panic. Captain Karim, a flicker of hope in his eyes, turned to him. You can guide us? Through the shifting dunes? Without this? Remarked Captain Karim Al-Jamil. The heavens are my map. We will not be lost, Farik ibn Yazid replied. While this exchange offered some small comfort, Sigerson had knelt beside the table, his attention fixed entirely upon the scorched parchment. He produced his own pocket lens and examined the damage with an intensity that shut out all else. A sudden gust of hot wind rippled the tent's canvas, for a moment casting his hawk-like features in shadow. This was no accident, Captain, and no work of desert spirits. Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson said. His voice was low and certain, cutting through the superstitious dread. He beckoned Karim closer. Observe the precision. A stray spark would create an irregular charring. A dropped coal would leave ash. This is the result of a focused point of intense heat, applied from directly above. Such a thing could only be achieved with a powerful lens, or a carefully angled mirror, used to concentrate the rays of our relentless sun. My mind flew at once to Herr Vogel and his peculiar collection of geological instruments, his finely ground mirrors and lenses. Sigerson's words hung in the air, a plain and logical accusation that was somehow more chilling than any tale of a djinn. He straightened up, his eyes sweeping over the faces of the men gathered at the tent's entrance. Our enemy is not a phantom, he is here amongst us, and he has just declared that he holds our path forward in his hands. Now we must place our trust in the stars, and in the man who reads them. Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson, answered. With the immediate crisis averted, an uneasy quiet returned. Preparations began to break camp and travel through the cooler hours of the evening, for we were now utterly reliant upon Farik's ancient skill. As the sun began its descent, painting the western sky in hues of orange and violet, I found my own gaze turning upwards, as did every other man's. We searched the darkening heavens for guidance, and I could not help but wonder what other, more sinister lights we might see in the desolate night ahead. With the destruction of our map, a palpable tension had settled over the caravan. It was as heavy and silent as the encroaching twilight. The sun had bled out across the horizon, leaving the sky a bruised purple. The vast emptiness of the desert seemed to press in upon us. A low wind soughed across the dunes, whispering against our tents and carrying the scent of cooling sand. Farik ibn Yazid, our new navigator, stood apart, his gaze already fixed upon the heavens, where the first stars began to prick the gloom. It was then that it appeared. From the crest of a distant, knife-edged ridge, a point of light flared with an impossible brilliance. It was no star, for it shone with a cold, white intensity before vanishing as suddenly as it had come. A collective gasp rose from the guides huddled near the camels. A moment of profound silence followed, broken only by the nervous shuffling of feet on the sand. Then, the light pulsed again. A sharp, deliberate flash. This time, the intake of breath became a cry. One of the men pointed a trembling finger, his voice a panicked wail snatched by the wind. Panic like a contagion swept through the camp. Men began to mutter and shrink back, their faces pale in the gloaming. Captain Karim strode into their midst, his hand resting on the hilt of his sabre. "Hold your nerve. It is a trick of the heat, nothing more." "A mirage," said Captain Karim Al-Jamil. But his words were lost as the light blinked once more, then twice in quick succession. A guide fell to his knees, shielding his head as he shrieked, "The eye! It is the eye of the djinn. He hunts us for the stone." "We are cursed," answered Guide. The sentiment ignited the others. They spoke of desertion, of placating the spirit by casting the diamond into the sands. Amidst the rising chaos, I turned to my companion. Sigerson stood perfectly still, a tall, angular silhouette against the dying light. His attention was not on the panicked men. It was fixed utterly upon the distant flashes. With a watch in hand, his thumb clicked the stopper at each pulse from the ridge. When the final flash died away, a tense quiet fell over the camp. Karim, having failed to pacify his men, turned to us with a grim expression. It was Sigerson who spoke first, his voice cutting through the tension with the cool precision of a surgeon's scalpel. "That, Captain, is no djinn." "Sherlock Holmes," as Sigerson answered. His voice was a low growl, attempting to command authority, yet I could plainly detect a tremor of fear within it. "Then, what in God's name is it, sir?" "My men are about to flee into the night," remarked Captain Karim Al-Jamil. "It is a man with a heliograph, or a similar device for projecting focused light. Observe the pattern. 2 short flashes, a long, another short. It is not random, Captain. It is rhythmic. It is language." "Sherlock Holmes," as Sigerson replied. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Nearby, I saw Herr Vogel, the geologist, shift uncomfortably. He began polishing a lens on his coat with a concentration that seemed entirely forced. Sigerson's voice dropped, becoming low and freighted with meaning. "It is a message. A signal from an accomplice who tracks our progress. It is not meant for the caravan, but for the one man amongst us who is expecting it." My friend did not turn his head, yet his statement hung in the air like an accusation. In the sudden, profound silence, the fear of the supernatural was replaced by something far colder and more immediate, the chilling certainty of a traitor in our midst. Every man, myself included, instinctively looked from one face to the next, searching for a sign of guilt in the deepening shadows. The desert, which had seemed so vast, now felt terribly small. The panic from the phantom light had bled away, leaving a silence more menacing than the preceding clamour. We gathered in the main tent, the canvas flapping fitfully in the night wind, a sound like monstrous wings beating. The air was thick with the scent of hot sand and fear. Captain Karim, his face etched with exhaustion, strode with heavy purpose towards the stout iron-bound chest, the very heart of our expedition. "We must ensure it is safe. The djinn watches us. Its eye has found our trail," answered Captain Karim Al-Jamil. His voice rasped low, frayed with dread. He knelt, hands trembling, as he examined the heavy padlock. A sharp, metallic click echoed in the tent, too subtle for a forced lock, yet unmistakably the delicate turn of a pick. Karim froze. With a look of profound horror he lifted the lid. A strangled cry escaped his lips. "Gone! It is gone! The curse is complete! The Star of Nubia has been taken by the desert spirits," Captain Karim Al-Jamil answered. He fell back from the chest as if struck, his despair a tangible weight in the flickering lantern light. The velvet-lined interior was brutally, starkly empty, revealing only a hollow impression where the legendary diamond should have rested. As the other guides erupted in panicked cries, Sigerson remained perfectly still. His impassive gaze surveyed the scene. He stepped forward, his movements precise and unhurried, and peered at the lock Karim had discarded. "There is no curse here, Captain, only a crime of considerable artistry." Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson said. He spoke with a calm authority that sliced through the rising hysteria. He held up the padlock for Karim to see. Observe. The mechanism is not smashed, nor has it been forced. It has been picked. This is the work of a man with a delicate touch and an intimate knowledge of complex mechanics. Such work requires time, concentration, and above all, a distraction. His sharp blue eyes, cold as the desert night, moved from the lock and settled upon one man, standing silently in the shadows. Farik ibn Yazid, the taciturn guard. Farik's face remained an unreadable cipher, a brilliant flash of light, Captain. A djinn's eye, that sent every man scrambling and staring at the horizon. In that collective panic, who would notice a quiet man, known for his past as a maker of intricate timepieces in Cairo, kneeling by this chest? Who would hear the faint clicks of his tools over the shouts of fear? The diamond is not in the spirit world. It is concealed amongst the personal effects of the one man who had the skill and the opportunity to take it, replied Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson. Captain Karim stared, first at Sigerson's implacable face, then at the stoic Farik. The idea, a seed of logic, struggled to take root in the fertile ground of superstition. He shook his head, his belief in the supernatural still warring with the stark accusation. But the light, no man could create such a thing. It was a sign, a warning from Allah, said Captain Karim Al-Jamil. Sigerson gave a slight weary sigh. He realized words alone were insufficient to banish a phantom that so gripped their minds. His gaze fell upon a polished water flask gleaming by the lantern. A spirit born of fear must be exorcised by fact. It appears, Captain, that a practical demonstration is required to truly banish this phantom djinn. Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson replied. A heavy silence fell upon our small company, broken only by the sharp crackle of the campfire spitting embers into the immense, star-dusted dark. Farik ibn Yazid remained a statue of indignation, his face a mask carved from desert rock. Captain Karim, however, looked utterly broken, his gaze fixed on the empty chest, as if it were a tomb. The other guides shifted uneasily, their whispers like the rustle of dry leaves, while the German geologist, Herr Vogel, watched them all with a detached, scientific curiosity, his voice assuming the calm, didactic tone of the Norwegian explorer Sigerson, cut cleanly through the tension, a steadying hand amidst the rising panic. Fear is a poor travelling companion, Captain. It clouds the judgment. Let us invite reason to our fire instead, observed Sherlock Holmes. He moved with a deliberate lack of haste, producing from his coat a small, polished silver flask. It caught the firelight, throwing a warm gleam across his sharp features. The men watched his every movement, their superstitious dread momentarily held at bay by simple curiosity. "You have all seen the phantom light," he announced to the circle of faces. "The eye of the djinn. A malevolent star winking from the blackness. You believe it a curse. I say it is naught but a trick of light and human ingenuity," Sherlock Holmes said. He beckoned to the despondent captain, his manner both a request and a command. "Assist me, Captain Al-Jamil. Your despair will not recover the diamond, but your mind may yet help us apprehend the thief." "Hold this," remarked Sherlock Holmes. He pressed the cool metal of the flask into Karim's hand. The captain accepted it numbly. Sigerson then gently adjusted Karim's stance, positioning him so the curved surface of the flask caught the full glare of the flames. The air was utterly still, the vast silence of the desert pressing in upon us. "Now, direct the beam. See that dark outcrop of rock, some 200 yards distant? Place the light upon it," Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. With an unsteady hand, Karim tilted the flask. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as if conjured from the very air, a brilliant pinpoint of light leapt across the darkness and struck the rock. A miniature star, born of fire and silver. A collective gasp went up from the guides. a sound of pure astonishment. His voice trembled slightly, a whisper of awe. "By the Prophet, it is the same," answered Captain Karim Al-Jamil. "Precisely the same in principle," he replied, his voice sharp as flint. "A simple reflection. Now, imagine this flask is not a flask, but a finely made mirror. Imagine our fire is not a fire, but the sun itself," declared Sherlock Holmes. He paused, letting the image form in their minds. The men stared at the distant point of light, the gears of understanding beginning to turn in minds previously clouded by fear. A man with such a device, a heliograph it is called, can send that beam for 20 miles or more. By interrupting it, he briefly passed his hand through the reflected light, making it vanish and reappear. He can paint messages upon the dark, letter by letter, as clearly as if he were shouting them across the sands. The logic of it was undeniable, a cold dawn of reason breaking over the dark landscape of their fear. The supernatural had been banished, replaced by the stark reality of a clever signal. The men looked from the distant point of light back to Sigerson, their expressions transformed, the last vestiges of superstitious dread melting away. "The djinn did not burn your map, Captain. Nor did it empty your water skins. It merely sent a message, a signal to its confederate in this very camp, telling him precisely when and how to act," stated Sherlock Holmes. The demonstration was over. He retrieved his flask from Karim's slackened grip. The silence that returned was of a different quality now, not of superstitious fear, but of tense human suspicion. Sigerson's gaze, as sharp and penetrating as a surgeon's scalpel, swept past the stoic Farik, past the astonished Karim, and came to rest with piercing intensity upon the German geologist Herr Vogel, whose quiet observation now seemed less like scientific detachment, and more like professional assessment. The embers of the campfire hissed and popped into the profound silence of the desert night. The last glint of Sigerson's demonstration faded from the distant rock, but its impression remained etched upon the faces of the men gathered around the flames. Captain Karim's expression revealed a dawning, horrified comprehension. The supernatural fear had been exorcised, only to be replaced by the colder dread of human treachery. Sigerson, however, did not relax his posture. He pocketed his silver flask, and the quiet academic who had delivered a lesson in optics was gone, replaced by a figure as sharp and unyielding as granite. His gaze, which had been fixed on the darkness, now swept over the assembled party and settled, with unnerving intensity, upon the German geologist. Herr Vogel shifted uncomfortably, his spectacles catching the firelight. "That demonstration was not merely for the edification of our guides, Herr Vogel. It was for you, Sherlock Holmes," as Sigerson answered. Vogel's mouth opened, a protest forming, but Sigerson gave him no quarter. His voice was low but carried with the clarity of a ringing bell. "You see, the djinn's eye was never a curse meant to frighten us. It was a message intended for the one man in this caravan equipped not only to see it, but to understand its meaning. Your collection of delicate instruments, your barometers and galvanometers, a curious assortment for a simple rock hunter, yet perfectly suited for a man anticipating precise, long-distance communication," replied Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson. "This is an outrage, an absurd fantasy. I am a scientist," Herr Otto Vogel answered. His loud denial rang hollow, betraying the panic beneath. Captain Karim stared at the German, his hand drifting towards the pistol at his belt. "A signal." "Sigerson, what are you saying?" replied Captain Karim Al-Jamil. Sigerson ignored them both. His attention pivoted with startling swiftness, his piercing eyes now fixed upon the silent form of Farik ibn Yazid. The navigator sat motionless, his face a mask of indifference, yet I saw the muscles in his jaw tighten. The firelight carved deep shadows across his features. "A message requires a recipient, Captain, but it also requires an actor." Herr Vogel was the brain, but he needed a hand to do his work. A man who knew the desert intimately. A man who could move about the camp unnoticed. A man whose loyalty, alas, was for sale. responded Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson. He took a step towards the navigator, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet every man strained to hear it over the crackle of the flames. The first series of flashes, 2 nights ago, that was not a random flicker. That was the instruction to slit the waterskins, was it not, Farrick? To create a crisis that would sow panic in dissent. Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson, replied. Farrick did not move, did not speak. He stared into the fire as if he had not heard. Sigerson continued his methodical indictment, his tone growing colder with each charge. Then came the map. A longer, more complex signal, relayed by some subtle gesture from our geologist here. It was an order to burn the captain's chart. An act designed to leave us utterly dependent on the one man who could navigate by the stars alone. Utterly dependent on the traitor. It cannot be. Farrick? Answered Captain Karim Al-Jamil. The captain's voice choked with disbelief and a profound sense of betrayal. Sigerson's final accusation landed like the blow of a hammer. And last night, the final signal. It told you the moment had come. It directed you to the captain's tent to steal the Desert Star, while we were all distracted by Vogel's conveniently feigned illness. He provided the plan. You executed the treason. All to sell the diamond to the very warlord we seek to evade. Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson, replied. The accusation hung in the dry desert air, absolute and damning. Every eye was now upon Farrick. The navigator's stony composure finally cracked. I saw his eyes dart wildly towards the enveloping darkness beyond the fire's reach. The desperate look of a trapped animal seeking escape. For a long moment after Sigerson's accusation, the only sound was the hiss and crackle of the campfire. Precise and undeniable, it hung in the cold desert air like a physical weight. Farrick ibn Yazid, his face a stone mask, offered no denial. His eyes, dark pools in the firelight, darted from Sigerson's unyielding gaze to the dancing shadows at the camp's edge. Then, with startling speed he moved. It was not the lunge of an attacker, but the desperate bolt of a cornered animal. He spun, kicking up a spray of sand, and launched himself into the profound darkness between the dunes. Captain Karim's roar shattered the silence, ripping through the night. "Seize him! Do not let the traitor escape," replied Captain Karim Al-Jamil. 2 of the captain's most loyal guards, tense as coiled springs, moved with astonishing swiftness. Their dark burnouses blended with the night as they intercepted the fleeing navigator. A brief, desperate scuffle, a grunt, the thud of a body on sand, and then a deeper silence. They dragged Farrick back into the firelight, his arms pinned firmly. His stoic mask was gone, replaced by the grimace of a man whose world had collapsed. "Captain, if you would be so good as to examine the man's saddlebags, the ones he guarded so jealously," remarked Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson, his voice, calm and precise, cut through the lingering tension, a stark contrast to the preceding violence. Captain Karim, his face a thundercloud of fury and disbelief, strode to Farrick's meagre possessions. He tore open the largest bag, plunging his hand inside, casting aside a waterskin and a parcel of dates. His hand stopped. Slowly, he withdrew it. For a heartbeat, it seemed the desert night had birthed a new star. Lying in his palm, the Star of Nubia drank the firelight and cast it back in 1,000 points of cold, brilliant blue. The assembled men gasped. Karim stared at the diamond, then at the captured guide, profound betrayal on his face. Farrick ibn Yazid finally broke, his voice a ragged whisper. "He promised me a fortune, enough to leave this life forever." Farrick ibn Yazid answered, "And for that you would sell your honor. You would sell us all to a butcher," answered Captain Karim Al-Jamil. The captain turned from the prisoner, his duty clear. The immediate threat was gone, but the architect of this treachery, Herr Vogel, was still riding towards the warlord's territory. Bind him. He will face judgment in Cairo. Omar, Take 3 men and our fastest camels. Ride northwest. Vogel cannot have more than a few hours. Lead. I want him brought back, and I want the German signaling device. This is no longer merely a theft. It is an act of war, responded Captain Karim Al-Jamil. His men moved with swift efficiency, as the first hint of grey touched the eastern horizon. Captain Karim stood for a moment, the recovered diamond clutched in his fist, his gaze fixed on the endless dunes that had so nearly swallowed our hope. His faith in djinns was shattered, replaced by the cold reality of human greed, and the grim necessity of the coming hunt. The night, which had been a close and suffocating shroud of suspicion, gave way to a dawn of crystalline purity. A cool wind whispered across the dunes, and the first light of the sun painted the eastern sky in strokes of pale rose and gold. The oppressive silence that had held our camp in its grip was broken by the quiet, purposeful sounds of a caravan preparing to march. The soft grunt of the camels, and the clink of harnesses being secured, were sounds of a world returning to order. My friend, still in the guise of the Norwegian explorer Sigerson, stood apart from the others, his gaze fixed upon the horizon. It was there that Captain Karim Al-Jamil found him. The captain's approach was hesitant, the crunch of his boots in the sand seeming loud in the morning stillness. The ordeal of the night had left its mark upon his proud features. He appeared a man profoundly chastened. Herr Sigerson, I have come to offer my profound apologies. I allowed the shadows of old tales to obscure my judgment, remarked Captain Karim Al-Jamil. Holmes turned, his silence a heavy counterpoint to the captain's confession. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, an invitation for the man to continue. I mistook a clever thief for a spirit of the air. I saw a djinn where there was only human greed. You, however, you saw only the facts. Your mind is a weapon sharper than any scimitar in this desert, answered Captain Karim Al-Jamil. A flicker of dry amusement seemed to pass through him, a rare concession. He seemed to appreciate the captain's choice of metaphor. It is a simple instrument, Captain, and one that requires constant sharpening. Superstition is merely a fog that obscures the landscape. The rational faculty is the sun which burns it away. Farrick's great error was in believing his performance was flawless, remarked Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson. But how could you be so certain it was him? He was the most trusted navigator, remarked Captain Karim Al-Jamil. Precisely. The damage to the maps was too specific, too expertly done. A common thief would have destroyed them crudely. A tear, a water stain. Our saboteur, however, subtly altered the star charts, shifting key constellations by a mere fraction. It was an act of surgical precision, designed not to make the maps useless, but to make them treacherous. Only a master of celestial navigation would conceive of such a subtle and devastating artifice. Sherlock Holmes, as Sigerson answered. Captain Karim stared at Holmes, his dark eyes wide with a dawning comprehension. It was as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders, replaced by a deep and abiding respect. In that moment, the chasm between the man of faith and the man of facts was bridged by a profound, mutual understanding. You have taught me a lesson I shall carry for the rest of my days. The world has terrors enough without inventing new ones, answered Captain Karim Al-Jamil. With a final formal bow, the captain turned and strode away, his back straight and his step once more assured. An hour later our caravan was in motion. The sun was now fully risen, and the mood of our party was transformed. The fearful whispers were gone, replaced by the steady rhythm of the camels' tread and the low hum of conversation. With the Star of Nubia secure in my friend's possession, and the traitor Farrick bound and guarded, we moved as one, a united column marching toward the promise of the Egyptian border. Holmes rode in silence beside me, his lean frame a stark silhouette against the vast, empty expanse of the desert. His mind, I suspected, had already moved beyond this solved riddle, seeking some other, deeper contemplation. It was many months after my return to London, with the peculiar chill of a November fog seeping through the window frames of my Baker Street rooms, that the letter arrived. It bore the postmark of Alexandria, and the crisp, thin paper felt alien to my touch. Yet the handwriting upon it was as familiar to me as my own reflection. The sharp, angular script of a man I had presumed lost to the world. It was signed Sigerson, but the voice that rose from the page was unmistakably that of Sherlock Holmes. I settled into my armchair, the fire casting a warm glow that did little to dispel the phantom chill of the desert I pictured. The rustle of the page was the only sound, save for the steady ticking of the mantel clock, as I began to read my friend's account. My dear Watson, if this finds you well, then my long silence has served its purpose. Our adventure in the Sudan concluded not with the rising of the sun, but with the dawning of a rather sordid and simple truth. The djinn that plagued our caravan was, as you would suspect, a creature of pure invention, though one of remarkable technical ingenuity, Sherlock Holmes said. I could almost hear the dry, precise tone in which he would have delivered these words, a faint smile playing on his lips. Our geologist, Herr Vogel, was no student of rocks, but a master of acoustics. His seismic instruments were nothing of the sort. They were, in fact, sophisticated listening devices and sonic projectors. The whispers in the night, the vanishing supplies, all were illusions. With one device, he could project a disorienting hum to frighten the guards, and with another, pinpoint the precise location of the diamond within its coffer. A most cynical deception. He went on to detail the man's ultimate motive, a piece of villainy that struck me as particularly cold-blooded. The greater treachery was not in the theft, but in its architecture. Vogel was in league with the very warlord from whom we were ostensibly rescuing the stone. He intended to steal the Star of Nubia and sell it back to him, profiting from the chaos he himself had engineered. He sought to turn a profit by fanning the flames of the very conflict his European employers claimed to be detached from. Avarice, Watson, is a far more powerful and predictable force than any desert spirit. The letter's tone then shifted. The sharp, analytical edge softened, replaced by a contemplative quality I had seldom seen in him. It was as if the immense silence of the desert had left its mark upon his soul, and yet the diamond itself gives me pause. We have saved it, wresting it from the hands of a tyrant. It will be placed in a museum, catalogued and admired behind glass. But in so doing, have we not committed a subtler, more permanent theft? For Captain Karim and his tribe, that stone was not a jewel, it was a story, a history, a point of celestial reverence. We have preserved the object, but have we not extinguished its meaning? Sherlock Holmes noted. The scratching of his pen must have been the only sound in his tent, a small noise against the vast, dark expanse of the desert night. My travels these past years have shown me the great machinery of our empire. We bring order, science, and commerce. But I have begun to wonder at what cost this progress comes. We catalogue, we collect, we civilize. In our haste to rationalize the world, perhaps we strip it of its soul. This case, my friend, has been a most worthy problem, not merely for the intellect, but for the conscience. It is one thing to unmask a villain, it is quite another to question the virtue of the cause you serve, observed Sherlock Holmes. I lowered the letter, the thin paper trembling slightly in my hand. The quiet of my London rooms felt profound. He was alive, that much was certain, but the man who had written these words was not entirely the same man who had disappeared at the Reichenbach Falls. He was broader, deeper, and more troubled by the world's shades of grey. The final line was a simple, yet resonant, promise. My work here is done, expect me when you see me. Your friend Sigerson, Sherlock Holmes observed sharply.